Hey guys, John here. So, we all love list videos, myself included, and I thought, why not make one on an interesting topic that can benefit a lot of us? So, this is going to be called the three things that we should be doing if we're wanting to get better at sound design, maybe learning a new synthesizer, things like that, just getting better overall. And these are going to be the three things that we should probably be concentrating on. So, the first one is going to be ear training because if you don't really know what you're listening for, then it's going to be hard to recreate that sound that you want to create, or maybe make the sound inside of your head or from a song or wherever it is. You should really know what you're listening to and how that basically translates to the knobs that you're going to have on your synthesizer. So ear training, what exactly do I mean by training your ear? So we have a default preset here, and generally most synthesizers are going to start off with a saw wave, but we're going to start off a little simpler with a sine wave, which is just this main tone. Right, it's pure, it's clean, there's nothing too crazy about it. Now, there's some songs out there, like, so for example, Bad Guy by Billie Eilish. Now, that one is really simple. It's a sine wave with some portamento and a little bit of reverb on it, and it's kind of just doing that melody. So if we went to like mono legato, now, if you play the actual melody, which I have done before, and I got copyright strikes, so I'm not going to be doing that anymore. But basically, you add some reverb onto this, maybe adjust the portamento, and play the notes at the right tempo. It's basically going to be that patch within itself. So let's put this back to off, and sine waves are probably the easiest one, right? That's just a pure tone, as we can see down here in the spectrum view. Right, just one line. So next we go over to the triangle wave, which is a little bit more complex. Now, if we play a note, we see all these lines here. Now, keep in mind that all of these individual lines are also individual sine waves themselves, but as you stack these upon each other and you reduce the volume of these different harmonics, then that's what becomes a triangle wave. Now, what's interesting, if we go over to a square wave, it's the exact harmonics as a triangle wave, just the volume, the amplitude of those individual sine waves is going to be louder on a square and quieter on a triangle. Now, when I first started out kind of figuring out what these different waveforms sounded like, I did have a little bit of trouble understanding the differences between a square wave and a saw wave, because the first time you kind of listen to those, it's kind of hard to differentiate the two. So the square wave and then the saw wave. So clearly we can hear a difference. Let's do maybe even a lower note. And another note. Saw wave, now a square wave. So they sound kind of similar because there are a lot of harmonics, but keep in mind the descriptions that help us differentiate between the two waves is super helpful. So for example, they will say a square sounds more hollow, and indeed it does. And then the saw is going to sound a little bit more buzzy in that sense. So we should definitely practice. Maybe if we're kind of unsure how they all sound together or how these individual waves sound like, then maybe we should take a little bit of time out of our day and kind of just play these and kind of try to guess which one's which. Maybe have someone play a saw or a square and try to figure out which one's right, just so you really understand what they sound like on their own. Because a lot of patches are either going to be made from saw waves, square waves, some triangle, and some sines. But for the most part, saws and squares are probably the most heavily used basic waveforms, at least what I've seen. So we have that. Okay, so let's say we get all these basic waveforms. Okay, we know exactly how they sound. What else can we train ourselves? Maybe you already know this. Maybe this is just kind of, you're just listening and saying, okay, John, I know what these basic waveforms sound like. They're basic. I know what they sound like. What else can we concentrate on? So that would maybe be the next thing would be pulse width modulation. So if you're wanting to move the pulse width here, that's a very good sound to know what that sounds like, because a lot of really nice rich pads are made from a few different pulse waves or square waves, depending on how you want to define that. They're slowly modulating between their pulse widths, or their duty cycles, I should actually say. So that's one thing that we can kind of focus on right there. And now maybe you already know that, and so maybe you can say, okay, what does unison sound like on a square wave? Now let's bring some of this mix up here. Okay, what does it sound like with a saw wave? Okay, we kind of get that. And now just kind of look around your synthesizer of choice and kind of say, Now, what different things kind of add together to kind of really change the sound? A lot of synthesizers will use more than one oscillator. So right now we have one. So if we added two different sound waves, we can tell that these are two different sound waves playing against each other. Now, these are both on random phase. So if we went to 0 on both of these here, we're just going to have a louder saw wave. And we're not really going to have that kind of constructive phase cancellation and enhancements that make those two different waveforms sound really good together. But as soon as we start changing the phase, we can start changing the phase of one oscillator against another one and kind of find a nice little sweet spot. Sometimes it might be better for bass, maybe sometimes for a kick drum or something like that. So those are some interesting things that you want to kind of experiment with. Now, and other ones that you can go on yourself and do these is, what does FM sound like? Maybe take a certain waveform and FM it by another one, add some harmonics to it, and kind of just listen and see what's happening there. Now, that's just on the waveform manipulation side. There's also things to do with filters, because a filter in a synthesizer really makes the big difference. You can have a great oscillator, great effects, but if your filters are weak, then the synthesizer itself is kind of weak in my opinion, because filters are very important. So just kind of knowing what different filters sounds like and saying, okay, maybe this type of filter is best used for a bass type of sound. Maybe this filter is better for a pad or a pluck or something like that with the resonance at a certain spot. So listening to different filters and kind of really getting to know the nuances of them will help you recreate any type of sounds that you want. So furthermore on that is saying, okay, what do my effects sound like? Because if we're here on Avenger, when we right click, we have so many different things to choose from, which is really cool, because it's almost like we have a kitchen of different ingredients that we can go through and say, okay, maybe the sound that I'm listening to has a light chorus on it. Maybe it sounds like there's one or two saw waves in it and some reverb. And then we can kind of listen for the amplitude or the amp envelope and then the filter envelope and kind of recreate what's going on there. So for example, if we're kind of, doing like an analog type of 80s patch, maybe we want two oscillators. Let's right click this, maybe go to a chorus. Okay, and then go into our filters like we're just talking about. And okay, here we have a vintage 12 or a 24. Let's try our 24. Bring this back, maybe give some resonance here. Increase this guy, some envelope modulation. And maybe that decay is a little bit too slow, or too fast, so let's slow that down a little bit. And we kind of have something like that there. So there we go. We can kind of learn things, and we can also look at our view here and say, hey, maybe this resonance is a little bit too strong. Maybe that might be better. And that's just some chorus, so generally there's going to be like some delay on there. And then probably some reverb too. So just getting to understand these basic little pieces, because at the end of the day, making patches, making sounds is not really that complex. There's just a lot of simple parts to it that all kind of work together that gives us the illusion of this being like some complex monstrosity, right? Each little thing is its own individual self. We have a saw wave. Okay, let's add another one. Then let's add one effect. Okay, a chorus. Let's do a little bit of filter motion here in this section, and then kind of get the resonance and the decay dialed in just right. And then we're going to put some delay and reverb on top of that, and we have a pretty usable patch already. Okay, so this is going to be that ear training, right? So looking at all our different things and kind of just really soaking in and understanding what they sound like. So another thing, this is going to be number 2. I know this is quite long, but I promise you if you make it through this and kind of apply these techniques, it's going to just make you a better sound creator, engineer, whatever you want to call it. So the next one is preset recreation, and we started to do this frequently on the channel because I think this is one of the best ways to learn something. If you're going through the different presets and whatever synthesizer that you're using, and you say, okay, I like this preset, so that already means you have all the content that that preset comes with. Maybe there's some samples in there. Maybe it's doing some weird granular stuff. And, if you're recreating it in the same synth, that's going to be a one-to-one kind of recreation, which is really cool. You could go a little bit further, I suppose, in that sense, and recreate that sound in a different synthesizer. That also kind of helps you kind of translate the different features and functions between the two pieces of software. That's also helpful. But if you're staying in the same one, it's super creative because there's going to be a lot of things where you would think, okay, to make this sound, I would probably do this, this, and this, X, Y, Z. And then once you start recreating it, you're going to think, oh, wow, I would have never thought to do that to make this type of sound. Or I would have thought, okay, maybe I'd make the sound in an entirely different way. You might get close, but might not exactly hit the bullseye on how to make that, which is why I think preset recreation is such a helpful thing to do, especially if you get presets from a very good sound designer, because then you're going to see those different techniques and see how, oh, maybe just like 0.2% of something can really make a huge difference. And then you say, okay, this makes that sound. And you start learning almost these mini recipes that you can later apply in whatever sound that you want to make. If you're thinking, okay, I want a nice smooth FM bass that just holds the low end, you're going to know exactly what to do, or a bass arp like we did previously, or some bells, or some nice pads, or some granular stuff. It's going to be almost second nature to you because you've already practiced these things and you've already implemented it, so you know how it's going to sound before you even make it. And from there, you might just go off on a tangent and make something even better than what you thought you were going to make. So preset recreation is so important to do. Highly recommend maybe do one a day if you're kind of low on time, or maybe one every other day, and kind of increase on their difficulty, because if you're using something like Avenger, there's some more simplistic patches you can make, and there's some stuff that uses almost the entire synthesizer. So using all 8 oscillators, you have all the ARPs going, multiple filters, a lot of different effect stacks, even master effects. So if those are a little bit too complicated for now, kind of put those aside and kind of work on the simpler ones and kind of just get used to it. And also by doing that, you're going to learn the synthesizer much better, and you're going to be quicker. You're going to know where things are pretty intuitively. So highly recommend to do the preset creation. Even when we do these on the channel, also highly recommend to follow along. It's cool to watch and see how it's created, but once you do it yourself, it really cements that inside your brain. So highly recommend to do that. And then the last one, and I think I personally found this out a little bit too late than I should have, because I've collected so many synthesizers throughout my life and the life of this channel that I wasn't exactly sure which one was the absolute right synthesizer for me in 99% of the times or the occasion, right? So when I got Serum a long time ago, like, it's a great synthesizer. I like how it sounds. The filters are cool, but there was something about it that just didn't exactly touch my soul in a way that other synthesizers have done before. Now, I kind of worked with that for a while. I did make some cool presets and, got me through a lot of songs, which is great. But then once more of them started coming out, and then Pigments came out, I'm like, okay, this is scratching that itch I have. And then you see something like Diva, like, wow, if I'm going for the analog type of sound and these recreation of these old synths, that's a really cool one to pick from. And then just going through Hive, how great that one sounds, how low CPU cost it is. And you kind of realize that some synthesizers speak to you more than others. Now, that's not necessarily to say that one's bad or one's good. It's just, it's going to be different for each different person. Maybe your workflow calls for something like Serum and not Pigments, maybe vice versa. Maybe you need an all-rounder like an Avenger synth or a Falcon, things like that. Then in that case, maybe pick the synthesizer that's right for you, because if you're just doing some maybe some synthwave stuff, you might not need a gigantic, extravagant synthesizer, or maybe you are sampling a lot of crazy things out and want to make really complex patches. So maybe something like a Juno emulation might not be the right synth for you. And they're all great in their own respects, but definitely pick the one that's right for you. And also, maybe if you're going on the path saying, like, I want to learn more and kind of just grow my skills, maybe find a synthesizer out there that'll grow with you, that you like how the interface is, because the interface is also extremely, extremely important in how you apply your sound design. Because sometimes there's some synthesizers where things are in different places than you would normally think. So you kind of almost create a different patch that you probably wouldn't have created in the synth that you use all the time, where you know where everything's at. So sometimes that can be good, or maybe changing out the skin of the synthesizer will also boost that creativity, make you feel a little bit better. I know there's some people out there who have some of the alternate skins for the Yuhi stuff, like Hive and Zebra and Diva and things like that, and they apply a new skin and they almost feel like it's a new synthesizer, and they become more creative with it, and they start applying in that new creative feeling, to make new patches, and kind of go on a whole different timeline. So that's kind of an important thing, is pick the synthesizer that's right for you. And as a conclusion, to wrap this kind of video up here, ear training, listen to different things and really understand what those things are doing. Then preset recreation, which I cannot stress enough how important that is. I've probably learned the most by recreating different sounds that I liked and learn new techniques that I've applied to different things. So highly recommend to do that. And maybe if there's a sound designer that you like, maybe you can go get a pack from that person and then kind of just look inside of that pack and see how those sounds were created. Because if you have those presets, you have a recipe right in front of you to remake that sound if you just give it enough of your energy and time and focus. And then that last one, like we just talked about, find a synth that's right for you. Look at some different demos if they have one, watch different videos of people using it, and maybe you might find that a synthesizer that's right for you, you wouldn't have guessed it was going to be that one until you went out and looked for it or it was presented to you. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you guys can apply these different things and you'll see how your skills and your mindset and your creativity are going to increase. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.